Wow, it's almost 1 year to the day that we bought this 280 SL, 1975 280 SL off eBay. It was a painted shell with a box of bits. Today's video, we're just going to be finishing off the carpeting. We've got to adjust the cross members in the footwells in order to do that. And we're going to panel bond them in, finish off the carpeting. And then we're getting ever closer to seeing whether this baby actually starts. Now this panel doesn't fit perfectly in the footwell. This here is about 1 millimeter too high, and similarly this here is about 1 millimeter too high. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut here and here and a little bit here, then we're just going to fold that down so it sits about 1 millimeter lower, because in order to clamp this, or in order for the 3M panel bond to work, this needs to be tightly clamped to another metal surface. We can't have that floating in midair and hope to fill the gap with the 3M panel bond. It doesn't work like that. We've made the little cut there. Next up, we're just going to use a set of mole grips to bend that down vertically, and then we're going to re-bend it a couple of mil further down, hopefully. The way I'm going to do this is I'm just clamping a thick piece of steel that we had left over from one of these sills against the back there, and that's going to give me a crisp edge, and then I'm just going to tap that over, and hopefully those mole grips will be enough to actually hold that in place. Okay, let's see if that fits any better. Fits perfectly now. We can press that down with a magnet and that'll stick to there. That's going to be fine. We've got a magnet on the other side, and when we put another neodymium magnet here, that's going to push that down. The only one we've still got to do is this one here. You can see that no amount of pushing that down is going to close that gap. That's about 1 mil or 2 mil out. All of these other gaps will be absolutely fine. We can pull the two together with magnets, but that one there is just too big. We've bent this one vertically, and then we just have to re-bend it, adding about 2 mil. Again, we've just clamped a thick piece of steel with a sharp edge there, and we're going to just bend this towards us. Ideally, you'd have that edge going all the way to the end, but the profile makes that a little bit difficult, so we may just have to do this in several stages. There you have it. You can see that that's a little bit narrower. That's because we've bent it in a different place. It doesn't come out as wide as this, but it's a little bit lower, so let's see if that fits. Pretty much perfect. That's now sitting flush on top of there, and we can set about putting the panel bond on and gluing that down. So there we have it. That pretty much fits perfectly now. We've got neodymium magnets along the top, and where necessary we've also got the same magnets on the bottom. So those are 50 kilogram pull magnets, so they're pulling that down together at 100 kilogram force, and that's easily enough to clamp that for gluing purposes. Arrived in the post is some 3M 0815. I'm going to take out the old tube and put the new tube in, then we'll squeeze a little bit out, make sure it's mixing properly, and then, as I've mentioned in a previous video, the way this panel bond works is you put a thin primer coat on this side, then you put a thin primer coat inside the car where you're gluing, and then we'll put a thicker bead on here, and then we'll clamp this down and leave it overnight. I've done a very thorough panel bond video before, so I'm not going to go over too much stuff here. I always like to take off a bit of the packaging so you can see how much panel bond you've actually got. The next thing to do is take this metal clip here out, like so. This will then screw off. If you've taken the little metal catch off, this green bung should just come out. And then what I like to do is just squeeze a little bit out before I put the nozzle on, just to make sure it's coming out. Next up, you just put the plastic cap over the nozzle, and this is a special nozzle that when the glue goes through, it mixes it evenly together, and you just tighten that down. The nozzle has already got a tip cut off, so we're just going to squeeze some out into a tissue. It's just a matter of putting a thin bead on here first. Remember, this is just going to be a primer coat, so we're going to make sure that all the bare metal is covered. Make sure that all the shiny metal surface is covered in the panel bond. This is going to protect it from rust, but as I say, it'll almost also put down a primer coat and aid the adhesion. So we've covered all the bare metal with a thin coat. Now we're going to do the same inside the car. Thin bead down, we just need to spread that evenly now. Make sure we cover any of the bare metal that we've sanded away. We've put our thin primer coat down where we're going to glue. Next we're just going to lay another thick bead along here, and then we're going to push it down, and what we're hoping is for a little bit of squeeze out just to fill any imperfections and gaps, and then we'll clamp that down with magnets. Got a nice bead on there. Now we just need to pick that up, put it in the car without getting glue everywhere, and clamp it down. So this is what we want to see, a little bit of squeeze out along the edges here. When we clamp that down, we'll see this little squeeze out here. We'll just clean that up. Make sure we don't leave glue everywhere. We've weighed that down with some bricks, bit of angle iron, also clamped it with the magnets, and we'll come back tomorrow and that should be glued. Now ideally you do both sides together, because in order to stop this glue going off you need to take this nozzle out and put the green cap in and then lock it in with that little metal catch. And obviously when we come back tomorrow we will end up wasting the amount of glue it takes to fill up the nozzle, but we've got plenty of glue there. You can see we've just used just under half of that glue, so we should be absolutely fine. And this glue came with 2 nozzles as well. You can't reuse the nozzles. Make sure you put this green cap in, push it down all the way and wipe off any excess glue. Then you can screw this bit down again and lock everything with that. That should be good to use tomorrow. So next morning we're just going to take all of this away and check that that's stuck down properly. Now we're lucky we won't have glued these magnets on. They don't normally glue on even if they end up with a bit of glue on them. Yep, I'm pleased with how that's coming out. As they say, that's not going anywhere. We just need to do the other side, then we'll put the carpets in, then we'll be able to button down the seats. Just to let you know, that's how much of the 3M panel bond is left after doing those 2 panels. So next day, this is solidly glued in, as is that one too. Next thing, we're just going to carpet both of those pieces. Then we're going to carpet the sills. Happy how that has come out. We've managed to glue both of those 2 in without getting involved in welding. And one of the great advantages of using that panel bond is, first of all, you don't need any special skills to use it. And secondly, when you're panel bonding, you're not burning away the primer when you're welding, which often tends to lead to rust, especially if you've left any pinholes or you haven't seam sealed things properly. So just as an example, as I mentioned, these are all new floor pans that somebody's put in here, but you can see that the first signs of rust are just coming through, and that's because when you weld that in, you're burning off the primer, and rust will get in there, especially if you haven't seam sealed it properly. I'm just under the car taking out these neodymium magnets that we used to glue those panels in, and I wanted to show you something. This here has supposedly been professionally welded, this car, but if you look at this gap here, this is supposed to be tied into the floor pans, and if you are replacing the floor pans on your car, you're going to have to take off this section as well. But you know, one of the reasons that I've started to do things myself is when I see some of the work that is done by other people, I think to myself, goodness me, I could probably with zero skill do the same thing myself. You can see how this has just been spot welded across here, but there's massive great big gaps here, and if you leave it like that, especially under the car, that is just going to rust away. And obviously this needs to be tied into here as well. So when we've got a chance to get this car up on a ramp, that's one of the things that we're going to have to address. When you come to glue these carpet sections in, obviously the cutout here goes on this dip, and this cutout has got to be below the section. This is basically where the seat adjust mechanism slides, so you don't want any carpet in the way. And the way I do it is to line up this edge here with the edge of the strut, and that bit just tucks over. Once again, you can use these neodymium magnets just to hold things down in place after you've glued it. We're just going to mask off the areas where we don't want to get glue. You're not ever going to see this because it's going to be under the seat, but it's always a good idea to work as neatly as you can. Once again, we're leaving the tape on here temporarily because it's helping us. Once we've got the carpet in place, take this tape off, just press everything down firmly. And as I say, it's a contact adhesive that works pretty quickly. We can move on to the other side. Now the carpet on this side is actually cut slightly different. There's a much bigger gap here and it's cut short here. So once again, you get what you pay for when it comes to buying carpets and seat covers, etc. Now the next piece of carpet that gets stuck down is this piece here, and it basically lines up to a natural ridge in the metal like this, and this end piece will then cover that like so. So you don't have to have that going all the way to the end depending on how long your carpet is cut, because as I say, that piece will sit over it like that. What you may have to do, we have a few of our blanking grommets missing here. We've got some of those, so we'll put those in first. And just bear in mind on this particular piece of carpet, this is not going all the way down to the floor. As I say, we're lining it up to that ridge there, and it's about a couple of centimetres off the floor. This then all gets covered by a piece of aluminium trim. All of the blanking grommets are missing along here, so we're just going to put them all in. I will leave a link at the end of the video of the part numbers and where to get them from. The cheapest place I've found is actually Mercedes. And just line it up along the edge here. Once you've got these side bits on, the next piece on is this piece here, and then that piece will overlap it. think I'm gonna leave this video here. We've got the bits of carpet in that we wanted to get in. It's carpet that we bought is not cut perfectly. Some bits are cut slightly shorter than I'd expect, but it's okay. I think unless you were looking really closely, you wouldn't necessarily notice that. The next video, we're going to be putting underlay down on the floors, possibly tidying those up and spraying them with a bit of rust encapsulator just before we put the underlay down. I'm really looking forward to getting the seats back in this car and getting the central console in. We've still got to adjust some of the wood paneling because the central consoles on earlier SLs actually are a different shape to later SLs. So when you buy the wooden trims for that, they don't fit and you have to adjust them. So we'll do that in the next video. Get the seats in, get everything buttoned up in the front, and then I'll be quite pleased that we've made it that far. It's taken us a year, and then I'm hoping by summer we'll have this car up and running. We got our 3M panel bond from these guys here off eBay, $49.99 delivered. Not cheap, much cheaper than if you live in America, but you can actually pay a lot more than that from other sources. So it's going to cost you between, I don't know, 38 and 50 pounds for some panel bond in the UK. You can get these blanking grommets from eBay, part number 000-987-4944, but they're hugely expensive. If you get them directly from Mercedes, they're about £1, just over £1, including VAT each.